Be quiet, please.
I think the managers.
He's now upset because I give information. But this is his deal with UFC. I don't deal with UFC. This is his problem. But we have deal with them. He's gonna fight in Madison Square Garden, and they say yes.
Whoa, it's horse beef. What is going on? I want to talk about Islam Makhachev's Day of Reckoning being leaked by Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I'm not even sure if it needed to be leaked. I think most people and their grandmothers assumed that this fight would take place in November at Madison Square Garden. And according to Khabib, it's looking to be the case. There seems to have been some kind of agreement made. And it's safe to assume that that is happening in November. November 22nd, I believe, Madison Square Garden. So very, very exciting. And not because I'm particularly excited to watch Islam go up against a tough stylistic matchup, which I believe it is. I think this is honestly the toughest fight in the UFC for him. Potentially even tougher than the fight against Ilia Topuria, mainly because this is a fight, as opposed to many of Islam's past fights, where he will actually be outsized here, right? Now, I've said it multiple times, and I know people will say, actually, Volk actually weighed more on fight day than Islam. No one gives a shit. Look at the frame, compare the size of the frame, everything. Volk was not bigger than Islam on fight day, but he was potentially just making a point to be as big as possible and as heavy as possible on fight day, so that does make sense. But to say he was bigger than Islam is just completely retarded, quite frankly. I'll give you Moicano. Maybe Moicano was bigger on fight day, sure. He actually did look pretty big in there against Islam, but it's Moicano. It's Moicano, right? Could you compare Moicano to JDM or even Volk skill for skill? Absolutely not. I mean, he just kind of got dog-walked in rounds 2 and 3 by Beneil Dariush, old man Dariush. So I'm just not trying to hear it whatsoever, man. This is a completely different fight to anything that Islam's ever gone in there against, because think about what Islam has really struggled against in his fights. He struggled against fighters with the boxing advantage. He struggled against fighters with good hands, essentially. Good hands is a pretty solid foil for Islam Makhachev, in my opinion, from what I've seen. And we've seen that if you're able to consistently fight off the takedown, maybe not just fight off the takedown, but get up off the ground, you can cause Islam Makhachev to considerably fade. Now, you could say he's moving up in a weight class, he'll be cutting less weight, but as we've seen based on this clip here...
Are you bulking up? Are you getting stronger? Are you just going to cut less weight? How is this going to work?
I will try to be big. It's not easy, man. All my life I cut weight, but now when I want to be big, my weight stays same position. I try to lift more. We do some program, and slowly we bring some, maybe 2 kg right now, and it's very hard, but I don't want to be big by food, eating and not training. I want to be with muscles, I want to training, do a right lifting program and bring some muscles.
As we've heard, Islam has expressed his want to put on weight. So if he's going to be bulking up, then he still will be having to cut weight at the end of the day, right? But it kind of all depends on how he puts on that weight. Obviously, if it's just pure muscle, you could say that he'll be strong and he'll be able to match JDM in the strength department. But still, putting on more and more muscle, the more muscle that you're carrying, the more your cardio can be affected. But obviously, Islam Makhachev is no slouch in there. He's just a well-rounded athlete. Right? He's never really shown to have necessarily a suspect gas tank. But when Islam is put in a situation where he's heavily grappling but not able to get you out of there, right? He's not able to actually get you out of there. He does slow down. He's slowed down against Dustin, but he's able to maintain that technique because he's so high level. As much as I do shit on Islam sometimes, I do it mostly because the fan reactions are hilarious, but I do have a lot of respect for Islam, and I can acknowledge the fact that he does have super high level technique to the point where even when he is fading, he's able to maintain that technique, and he was still able to get Dustin Poirier out of there with that beautiful ankle pick and then into the Darce, I believe it was. It was a beautiful finish. He was able to push for it, but it doesn't change the fact that he was slowing down considerably in that fight. And he has some very, very serious tells when he is slowing down. Mainly for Islam is, as you can tell when his punches have lost a lot of steam and he's just kind of throwing, but there's nothing on those shots. He just kind of throws those shots in order to get you into the tie clinch. Then he starts to land some knees. So he throws very lazy combinations with really nothing on them, just window dressing boxing combinations in order to close the distance, and he does that willy-nilly. And we did get to see a couple examples of Dustin Poirier punishing him for that, right? Just ripping him to the body with those combinations, while Islam Makhachev had the Thai clinch, right? But it just seems to be a massive drawback of this camp in particular, right? Even Usman Nurmagomedov against Paul Hughes, you could see towards the end of the fight, man, after long rounds of grappling and mixing it up on him, if you're not able to get him out, these dudes do tend to fade, and those tendencies come out. And they seem to be consistent among these guys. Islam and Usman similar, right? Usman, he's starting to fade. He starts, reaching in to clinch lazily. Paul Hughes was cracking him on the chin and punishing him for that. JDM is the last person that you want to be lazily reaching into clinch against, because he's so active with those hands. And he showed that against Belal, right? And Belal is more of a pressure fighter than Islam is. Islam isn't much of a pressure fighter. He's very technical, obviously more technical than Belal is, and more technically proficient with the grappling. So obviously if Islam is able to get JDM down, you would expect JDM to have a harder time getting back up. But then again, JDM is bigger and stronger, presumably, than anyone Islam's ever fought. And I just don't think it'll be all peaches and cream trying to keep him on the ground. It doesn't seem realistic whatsoever. And JDM showed to have elite ability to get up, not just keep the fight on the feet, but get up once the fight is on the ground. He never stays complacent off of his back. He's constantly rolling and scrambling and shrimping and doing his best to get back to his feet, and he showed the ability to do that against Belal, which is very impressive considering what Belal has done or had done to his previous few opponents, man. Domination. Complete domination. Bilal's pressure is nothing to be fucked with. It's no joke, and the fact that JDM dealt with it so well, fighting off the back foot out of both stances, switching while throwing combinations off the back foot, angling off, it was a thing of beauty and something that I didn't even know that JDM had in the arsenal. I didn't know he was that good of a counter boxer. I didn't know that he could fight that well off the back foot, but clearly we've seen a leveled up version of JDM with real confidence in his, not only, like I said, takedown defense, but ability to get up off the canvas after being taken down. That level of confidence shows in his striking because he's not tentative to let his hands go, right? Think about Alex Pereira against Magomed Ankalaev, completely frozen up because he was singularly focused on fighting off the takedowns. Singularly focused on that, it seemed like, at least, right? Based on his inactivity when the fight was standing. But JDM, in how active he is with his hands and how active he was against Belal, shows just the utmost confidence in his ability to keep the fight standing and get the fight standing if he is taken to the mat, as I said, which is something that cannot be discounted here because we saw against Dustin Poirier. And I know people like to point to the Dustin fight and say, well, Dustin looked really good on the night. But yes, he looked very good on the night, but he did look considerably slower and less willing to let his hands go because of the takedown threat. He was still able to have a lot of success against Islam and keep that fight very competitive until that fifth. And like I say, credit to Islam, even though I noticed him fading and I thought could spell lots of danger for Islam, the fact that he was still able to fight and get that fifth round sub is just brilliant, man, and shows why he's one of the two best fighters in the world currently fighting. The man is simply elite. No one can deny that. But Craig Jones seems to be this great equalizer. I believe Alex Volkanovski worked with Craig Jones leading up to that first Islam fight, and look at how well he was able to deal with the grappling. Islam had his back for like an entire round and couldn't secure a submission. Volkanovski's takedown defense and get-up ability looked spectacular, and compare the size between Volkanovski and JDM. JDM is massive in comparison. He has a massive frame. He has wide shoulders. He carries a lot of muscle, and he showed to have a 5-round gas tank while constantly, or not necessarily constantly. There were a lot of moments in that Belal fight where JDM was able to push forward and land with Belal's back against the fence, but a lot of that fight was him backpedaling, moving, constant footwork and angling off, as I said, switching stances while fighting off takedowns, and never looked to fade to any considerable level. But we've seen that when Islam is forced to grapple heavily without getting that finish, he does slow down. Not in the same way that Khamzat Chimaev does necessarily, where he's a completely different fighter, because as I said, Islam is so elite that he's able to maintain that like awesome technique, right? Even when he is faded. But you can see the difference, man. His punches lose a lot of steam, and he doesn't provide really much danger, really. And as this fight goes on, I believe that JDM's finishing ability goes up, while Islam's just will only go down, because he's going to be trying to hold down the bigger man, right? The bigger man, which I don't think he'll have a lot of success with. I don't even think he'll be able to get JDM down very easily. Obviously, when it comes to the variety of takedowns, Islam is far more varied than Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad is just, he's a pressure wrestler. He puts on a great pace and just breaks you down with volume. While Islam in the clinch, man, he's very crafty. He's very crafty. His judo is obviously levels above Belal's, and just the variety of trips and throws that he's shown to have, like just that deep tool bag of takedowns and just the ability to get his opponent to the ground, right? He's very crafty in that regard. He's super skilled, man. Like this is obviously the biggest test for JDM as well. I'm not sitting here pretending like this is a walk in the park for JDM by any means, but I just see him as such a stylistic threat for Islam, just because of how Islam has shown, man, in the championship rounds, danger level, man, it dissipates, and JDM seems to grow as time goes on because he's digging to the body, and he does sort of play that long game. He doesn't necessarily have one-shot knockout power, but at the same time he can crack. Like look at the damage he put on Belal's face. Obviously Belal needs to get a lot of credit for the toughness he showed, but he completely broke Belal's face in that fight. The dude does have hammers, and he does throw with a lot of power. And even though Islam isn't necessarily chinny, we also haven't really seen him get caught on multiple occasions by really big punchers. Like who's he fought who's like a real big puncher? Moicano appeared to have dropped him briefly in that first round, but it's tough to really see whether or not the shot actually lands or if Islam was just knocked off balance. Obviously, we know he was knocked up by Adriano Martins, and he was rocked real bad and close to being finished by Volkanovski the first time around. People will point to that hydration. I don't give a shit. If Islam had less time to rehydrate, then so did Volkanovski. So what the fuck kind of excuse is that? Although he did eat some pretty big shots from Dustin Poirier. But Dustin Poirier himself is more of a volume puncher than anything on top of that too, right? But JDM, dude, the way he mixes up the target, the way he switches, the way he digs to the body. And this is how I see the fight going, right? I see it, round one, Islam comes out, heavy grappling approach. Obviously, he doesn't really want to strike with JDM. People like to talk about Islam being one of the best strikers in the UFC. Listen, I agree that he's technically, he's proficient. He has a pretty good jab, he has a pretty good lead hook, and he has a pretty good cross. He does, and he has a good round kick. But he's really not a spectacular striker. He gets by with his mediocre striking because of the takedown threat. Because the takedown threat is so pertinent, right? No one wants to be taken down by Islam Makhachev. But I'm not so sure that JDM will have that respect here for the grappling, right? And in that first round, as Islam is trying to get JDM down, even if he gets him down, I don't think he'll get him out of there. I don't think he'll sub him. I think JDM will be able to get back to the feet. And I believe that the more takedown attempts Islam shoots, the more failed takedown attempts, because in between those moments, right, JDM is a high volume striker who likes to attack the body, and against someone like Islam, who, like I say, slows down, but not to a real considerable degree. But we haven't seen Islam in that scenario where he's getting his body peppered up by someone like a JDM, where he's pushed up against the fence by a high volume striker like JDM, who doesn't really respect the takedown threat like Dustin did, because Dustin wasn't high volume in that fight. He is typically a very high volume striker. He likes to throw long-winded combinations at you. He wasn't able to do that against Islam, right? He kind of froze up in that way. He did, and he was focused on fighting the takedowns off, which he did very effectively. But JDM, being the bigger man, I think will be able to fight off the takedowns. I'm not going to say with ease, because he will have to have some tricks in his back pocket to answer some of those tricks that Islam will have, right? He's a lot more crafty when it comes to getting the fight to the mat, as I say. But JDM, I think, will match him there. I think he'll match him. I think he'll scramble back to his feet over and over again. I'm thinking by the third round, we'll see Islam Makhachev showing some of those chinks, right? Showing those tendencies that can get him hurt against the wrong opponent. And I think JDM's the wrong guy, man, to be showing those tendencies. This is a weight class we've never seen Islam fight in. We have no idea how he'll look here. Islam himself has no idea how he'll feel in the octagon, where Islam Makhachev and guys like Khabib were able to be so physically imposing at 155. That big jump up to 170, I think, will make a world of a difference. Because I've always believed that if fighters like Khabib, Islam, and Khamzat Chimaev, these fighters who were reliant on being physically imposing in the octagon, if they're giving up size, they won't be nearly as effective. Maybe Khamzat Chimaev just for a round, obviously, because he is so explosive and so powerful for one round. I believe he could probably take down a heavyweight in round one. He probably could, right? Maybe not be able to sustain it, but he could probably take down a heavyweight in round one. But even just the way that Khabib has spoken about this fighting as JDM, he seems to be quite worried about this matchup. I think he saw what a lot of us saw, because Khabib is anything but a delusional person. Khabib is not delusional whatsoever. He's very realistic, and he has a great mind for the game, and he can see it the same way that a lot of us are seeing. Like, all of you fanboys going around saying Islam buy whatever he wants, whatever. Habib disagrees with you. Habib recognizes how difficult this matchup is, and he's taking it very seriously, and that's what I would take most confidence in as an Islam fan. It's just the fact that they are recognizing how difficult JDM is as a matchup. And I agree with him that this is probably a tougher matchup than the Ilya fight. It seems to be for me. This is a really tough matchup on paper. It will be anything but a walk in the park here. And it's a big fight, dude. I'm very excited. I'm beyond excited for this one. And I believe that there's a high probability that JDM actually finishes this one in the later rounds. Although it is hard to be confident about that, considering that Islam is as good as he is, and he could always come in here and surprise me, of course. But this is just a feeling I have. I do think a 4th or 5th round TKO is definitely here on the cards for JDM, and I think is the most likely result in this fight. I could also see a decision victory for JDM. I could see a decision victory for Islam. I could even see a submission victory for Islam. But it is really hard to see JDM getting subbed by anybody, really, especially somebody coming up in weight, making that big weight class jump. I think we will see the effects of the size difference here. I really do think it'll play a huge part, and it's hard to even see the lighter man skill coming into play because JDM does have the lighter man skill. The man is seriously good, and he's being counted out by a lot of fans here, but at the same time, Islam is also being counted out by a lot of fans, and I think realistically, this fight, I think, is close to like a 60-40 as far as how I'm leaning towards JDM, 60%, maybe 40% Islam. But the closer we get to the fight and the more I think about it, the more I'm leaning more like 70-30 JDM. I really do think this is a tough matchup for Islam. It's going to be a tough night in the office. Khabib sees it, and he's completely right here. But yeah, those are just my early thoughts, just like I gave my early thoughts on DDP and Khamzat Chimaev, since this fight has essentially been announced at this point, and I really doubt that we'll get any other date other than that. It seemed likely from the beginning that this fight would take place at Madison Square Garden. It does look like that is what's taking place. So anyway, guys, I cannot wait for this. Let me know in the comment section below if you agree, you disagree, if you're looking forward to this fight, whatever you think about my video of this fight, whatever your thoughts surrounding this are. I would appreciate your thoughts as always. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.